You're all very welcome to this practice support information session. And today I'm joined with Conor McLaughlin, who's a solicitor up in Donegal, and we'll be getting started in a minute or two. So if you have any questions, we'll take them on the chat. And just to let everybody know, this is the last of this series for July and August. So we'll be taking a rest for those 2 months and come back in autumn with a new schedule. So thanks everyone for joining us. So you're all very welcome to this practice support information session, and I'm joined today with in conversation with Conor McLaughlin, a solicitor up in Bundoran, about his practice and growing his practice. So we're just waiting for Conor to come back to us. He joined us earlier. Oh, here he is. So you're very welcome, Conor. If you want to come off mute, I put you on mute there.
On mute, yeah.
Yeah. So you're all right.
Are you okay?
So we'll get started. It's just gone 1 o'clock. So you're all very welcome to this practice support information session. And today we're going to be doing a shared learning session with Conor McLaughlin, who's a solicitor up in Bundoran, County Donegal, on growing his practice. So Conor, you're very welcome to join us today.
Thanks, Justin.
And I know, as we were talking earlier, that you've set up in practice in the last 3.5 years. So I suppose in starting off the conversation, what drove you to set up your own practice? And do you want to give us a little bit of a background to yourself, please?
I set up in November 18. I suppose the flexibility of working for yourself was a big plus. That was a big draw of mine, and a bit of ambition as well, I suppose. And just the opportunity came up to purchase a practice not too far from home, so I went with it. There's no perfect time to set up, and the opportunity was there, so I decided to go ahead. And
had it always been in your mind that you were going to set one up yourself, or?
Probably had. I mean, I came back to Ireland 3 years previous to that, and I had worked in Luxembourg, practiced there for 5 years previous to that. And certainly when I was abroad, I got to a stage where, I wanted to come home, and I suppose I wanted to come home and do something maybe, a bit ambitious anyway. But it takes time to settle back into the country and indeed the practice of law, because what I did in Luxembourg was a lot different. So you need to re-engage with Irish law and push yourself into a position where you're available to you're able to proceed. It's not off that phone, Justin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies, Justin.
No problem. And so did you join a firm when you came back then? And then while you were in that firm, you were thinking about looking at other opportunities? I'm presuming that's a sensitive time if you're working within a firm and then trying to set up at the same time. I mean, it's...
Yes, I came back and I worked for another firm, but I didn't have a strict timeline in that, i.e. I'm going to spend 3 years here and then go off on my own. I didn't know how long it would take to be in a position to do that. I didn't know when the right opportunity was going to come around, when I'd be ready, in terms of finances or just in terms of experience, I suppose, as well. So there was no set date. It was a question of, I was delighted to move back home and I was going to make the most of it. And I suppose the stars aligned somewhat in 18, and the practice became available, and I went with it then. And
and in deciding to go ahead with the practice, did you do a business plan, or did you do due diligence, or what was your kind of criteria for proceeding?
Well, I mean, if you go to a bank for a start, you're going to have to do a business plan, and that's a good exercise. So yes, I did have to do one, and I think it's a good exercise. But business plans they're like fee planners. It's aspirational. Whether it comes to fruition or not, it's another thing. It's there's a lot of variables and a lot of things that can happen, but of course you have to have a plan and you have to try and predict as best you can.
So you did some level of financial analysis,
Oh,
given
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
And then in actually conducting the actual purchase of the practice, did you do due diligence around that, and did you use somebody to do that for you, or how did that happen?
No, I did it myself, and that's a piece of work that's incredibly important. I had some experience in doing something similar, but yeah, I mean, things like undertakings, the anti-money laundering, the Section 68 as it was then, Section 150 now, um, and a review of files that had to be conducted. In reality, you're up against it in terms of timing. You can't really be around the practice for months on end, reviewing every file that's there. So it's a business decision at the end of the day. And I mean, I think that you get a feeling for a place anyway when you meet the principal, when you have perhaps some exposure to that firm previously and the practices and so on. People know, I suppose, what a firm might be like to work in, before ever stepping into it.
Did you know the principal before, so you were on good terms with them, or was this just a random connection?
No, I didn't know Lawrence, unfortunately, at the time, but got to know him, and he had a great reputation, and that helped a lot, and very helpful, both himself and his wife, who's also a solicitor, in terms of greasing the wheels and getting things going, and helping with the transition.
What were the specific types of things you looked at just in that very narrow window that you would have had? Like, what was important to you in making that decision?
Well, I think reviewing the files and those, the normal questions you would ask, like, are there any claims against the firm? The undertakings, the recording of the undertakings, critical dates, Section 68 /150. Are terms signed? Is there a quality mark of some sort? Really, I mean, industry standard stuff that you would ask that, if it's present or not, I suppose,
Yeah. And then moving to the actual executing the transaction, did you have to take on financial debt or talk to a bank in relation to financing this acquisition of sorts?
Yes, definitely had to talk to a bank. I mean, you have to open the client and the office account, and if you want to apply for an overdraft, then that's something you have to do. And the accounts, the ending of the previous firm's accounts need to be looked at and reviewed so that you're satisfied all's in order. And yeah, timing is a big issue, and it's hard to get everything right. There's a bit of administration. Then obviously your insurance company, you need to contact them. You need to contact the law society to tell them you're actually taking over. You need to consider, are there any files that are sensitive? Families that perhaps had a long standing in the firm that would be upset if the firm were sold and they weren't told about it. You do have an obligation to make every client aware of the transfer of the firm who has money on account, for example. But in addition to that, I suppose you also need to find out, are there people who would be upset if you don't tell them, So that's a consideration as well.
So just while we're on that, we've had a question there around, is there someone that values the firm?
The traditional way to value a firm was, I think, counting the number of wills in the wills safe. But now, what you tend to see is the value of the goodwill, so the good name of the firm, and secondly, the WIP, or work in progress. So the work in progress, let's say there's 10 conveyancing files of €1,000 each, and they're all halfway there, then perhaps the value of the whip is €5,000. So that's a way of valuing it. And then of course you need to think about what's actually being sold. Are the computers and the furniture being sold? And anything else, any intellectual property. I imagine in the future, the way things are going, that good websites and social media presence and how many followers you have maybe on Twitter might be just as important.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of an exercise both for the solicitor and maybe an accountant, I would have thought as well.
Yeah.
Did you use an accountant in assessing the value, or?
In assessing the files and the ledger cards, yes. The value too. I mean, if they're an experienced accountant, they would know roughly. There are brokers in Ireland who buy and sell firms, also.
Yeah, which legal firms or just firms in general? Yeah,
legal firms.
Yeah,
and they can assist in terms of whichever side they're on, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note that it's in any transaction there needs to be sort of two agents as such. So you shouldn't really go with their agent if you're the purchaser.
No, independent. No, definitely not. And I mean, I probably drew on my previous experience that I had seen what it was like to go into a firm that somebody had anticipated buying, and I knew what to look for, or had a good idea. But at the end of the day, this firm, for example, was 70 years old when I bought it. You don't know everything that's gone on in the 70 years, and there is a business decision to be made, I suppose, that people go in and they have a feeling for a place, I suppose, and
sure,
and that's important. But yeah, I think having another set of eyes on it, particularly an accountant, perhaps a broker, certainly asking the right people if it's an area you're unfamiliar with, I think would be important as well.
So, like, moving more forward a little bit, I suppose, is that you've decided to purchase the practice and you've purchased it. I suppose one first question is, was there any learnings that you would have done differently? And then you're now in situ, and so how did you go about choosing a practice area or retaining the services that they had and moving the business forward over the last 3 years? I want to talk a little bit about that.
My background would have been more litigation, and this firm was certainly more probate conveyancing, so that was a bit of a challenge. But I didn't want to discontinue my litigation practice, and I obviously needed to pay the bills. So it was a question of getting the firm into a position where you could hire someone, I suppose, to do the conveyancing, probate, and that you could establish a litigation department within the firm. And that's really what has happened. So we're happy with how it has developed so far.
Have you developed any other areas of business that like, are you seeking to grow your practice further?
Yeah, we certainly are. I mean, when I bought the firm, it was one full-time solicitor and one part-time, and now we're 3 full-time. So it has grown. But in terms of like the transition period was probably in reality maybe 14 to 18 months in terms of clearing out the old and bringing in the new, establishing a case management system, spending a lot of time and money in terms of the website and the social media, I suppose making contact with local newspapers and drafting articles for those newspapers. It took a long time to provide a base to really push things on.
And would you say you have an established sort of social media policy or marketing plan in place now that you kind of adhere to?
We have. It's always a challenge too. I mean, your social media or your website is like what your shop front was, I suppose, 20, 30 years ago. And you're constantly trying to make it more attractive, I suppose, and make the message as simple as possible while being professional.
Yeah. And what's the hardest part of running your own practice that you've sort of?
I think concentration on one area. I mean, if you're in court in the morning, for example, you have something else that you're running up against in terms of a deadline. Staff need your okay or authority to do something, and you've other pressures. It's just balancing those pressures. I think, like most solicitors, have those stresses and strains, but as a business owner, it's probably a bit more amplified, I'd say,
Yeah. And what type of, it's sort of a balancing act. I think all business owners kind of have those types of things, but in a solicitor practice where it's, error is, making errors is not really received well. You can't really be make too many errors in it. So you really do need to concentrate. So I totally understand where you're coming from. With regards to like the types of technology that you use in your practice, how would you rate it? Like the use of,
in terms of how would I rate it in terms of importance?
Yeah, or just your use of it, and how do you see that whole technology area, and then the sort of the move to?
I think it's very important. I mean, our first investment, or not the first one, but maybe after 14 months, when we had a sort of lean list of open matters, and we probably closed down 1,200 matters in the first 14 months. So there was a huge admin battle to get through in that first 12, 18-month period. And once we had that done, then we were in a position where we could open a case management system, and we depend heavily on it now because we've gone paperless as much as a solicitor's firm can go paperless. And we work off our computers. We have two screens, one for reading and one for your emails or whatever the case may be. So we're quite dependent on IT and intend investing more, I suppose, and making full use of it. And I think COVID perhaps presented an opportunity for a lot of people to do that. And I
think it's driven a real big change in work practices just by the very nature that we're even having this call. We're having information sessions. We're having remote.
The first one of these I did was in situ in the Law Society, and it was lovely to go up, and I don't think that can be replaced. I think that it's good for a while, but I think the novelty may wear off to a certain extent.
I think humans like to meet people in person, and that's just a natural instinct of ours, and it can't be replaced by a Zoom call. I mean,
it's important, and a quiet word sometimes after a court with a colleague can do the same amount of work as 15 or 20 letters,
Absolutely, and the use of the overuse of email when maybe a call or a personal kind of contact will be better. Which kind of leads me nicely onto the kind of next group, the type of networking that you think or is important to build up a regular clientele list. And maybe it's slightly up in Donegal because it's slightly bigger. Is there? I'm thinking more of people who are not in Dublin. How do they go about doing the networking?
Yeah, I don't know if we've done direct networking really. We've put a lot of time and effort into the website. The reality is doing good work and having people compliment your staff is the best form of networking. I suppose there's the website, the social media, and there's the newspaper articles and the like of that. That all takes time.
Is there any one area that works particularly well for you, do you think, or that you've had more success?
I think having an informative website and social media that sends a simplified message is definitely of benefit.
And do you do much going out there and making speeches or talking, just generally about what you do at events or networking or
I think I did
local
more,
chamber of commerce? Yeah,
I think I did more before COVID. To be honest, I would have gone to the Institute of Technology or the in Letterkenny and the like of that, and yes, I would have attended events probably more so when I was in Letterkenny in the north of the county.
How do you sort of foresee the future of practice in Ireland going forward? Where do you think the opportunities are, or how do you see the adoption of technology?
Are you talking about AI and the like of that?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. What do you see happening? Is there going to be less high street legal services, more specific, specialized legal services, or do you see legal services being delivered
I definitely think
remotely?
specialized legal services is a better idea, and ultimately it's a higher quality. I think that in terms of firms, I think that you're going to have fewer small firms, and I think that definitely to make the business effective, I think that firms need to grow, and you can't have a 2, 3 solicitor firm and have experts in accounting, experts in marketing, and experts in business development. You need a far larger firm to fuel the wages of non-fee earners. So I think that the future is possibly firms maybe merging, and getting a little bit bigger and having a bit more muscle and a bit more influence from other businesses. I think would be good too, not maybe totally relying on solicitors and other solicitors' practices. Just being allowing yourself to be influenced by other businesses. They have lots of good ideas, and we should be a bit more open to them, I think.
Yeah. And do you see any new sectors in your geographical location that are growing, such as the food industry or tourism or other related property?
Well, well, in terms of tourism, I'd say that Donegal has probably been discovered since COVID, and definitely when you walk down the street in the summertime here, you hear people from Cork, Kerry, and Munster that never really would have ventured north of Galway, I think. So, but how you translate that into work for solicitors in Donegal, I don't know. In terms of new areas that solicitors can benefit from, I think that the anything surrounding the internet now and email and privacy and items like that are definitely growing. And I think that you need to keep up to date with technology. You don't have to be a servant to it, but I think you definitely need to keep up to date and you need to use it. So that maybe would be.
So if anyone would like to ask us a question, we're just getting into the final few minutes. Conor, like after 3.5 years of this, is it what you expected, or what do you think? What's different, and what's what you thought?
Yeah, so much has happened in those 3.5 years. I can't even remember what I expected. But I remember the first talk I did in the Law Society, and one of the things, there were several speakers, and a lot of them were very technical and incredibly useful. And I suppose my speech was more about just practical experience. And I think one of the things you should do if you're thinking about it is write down the reasons why, because there will be tough days ahead, and you'll need to look back at those reasons why to justify, the fact that you're in the office at midnight on a rainy Tuesday or a Sunday morning or a Saturday night or whatever. But I think that.
So you being a sole practitioner requires additional sort of sacrifices because you are the boss. Really, is that?
Yes, I think so. I think so. You can only delegate so much at the end of the day. But you have to delegate something. You have to believe in your staff as well and delegate as much as you can. And getting a good team around you, it takes time as well. So.
Yeah, from management kind of speak, like delegation is essential for the total group to move further forward, as opposed to everybody operating individually.
Trusting people, telling them why they're doing something and having them do it is the only way forward. I mean, if you want control of everything, then you're going to be you're not going to have a very long future in practice. You're going to just exhaust yourself, and it's a tough job the way it is. So I think you do have to delegate, and definitely key.
So, like one of the features then obviously is additional pressures, additional responsibilities, etc. Would you change that for a more regular job in a partner in just a legal practice? Would you change all that, or?
I suppose working for yourself, regardless of what the industry is, liberating and frightening in equal measures. And you will get used to it, I suppose. But no, I wouldn't go back to working for somebody else. Is the answer, I suppose. It's definitely more interesting working for yourself. I suppose it's just getting that balance that you want to be doing what you like doing, which is the law or litigation or conveyancing, and there's constantly other requirements or other things that are nagging at you that you need to get to as well, and it's just being organized, I suppose, and delegating effectively. But it takes time. There's no magic bullet.
I suppose just a final question or two is like, would you change anything, or if you in starting out?
I don't think so. I think you just have to be patient in terms of your expectations, and I probably had plans for the first year and didn't achieve some of the things on there or half of them, but achieved other things that were much better that I didn't know about at the beginning of the year, and that happens constantly, I think, but
yeah.
I think the important thing is being able to look back every 6 months and go, right, well, we have improved in these areas or whatever the case may be, and just so you're not stagnant and that you're thinking. And the problem I suppose solicitors have is they're so busy, having that time to lift your head above the parapet, look around and see what's really going on here, as opposed to the head down in a book or drafting or whatever, and not really looking around at the maybe opportunities or just looking around at what's happening around you, I suppose,
Yeah, you need to make some time for strategic thought. I thought an interesting point you also made there is you wrote down goals and objectives and then you return to them after a period of time. And I must say, I find that very useful for myself personally. Yeah. But what I find is some of the goals or objectives, they may take a year or two to achieve, but the fact that they're written down lends itself to actually being achieved, as opposed to just running listen, it's all going to be topsy-turvy for the first year, I'll not bother. Mm-hmm. I think that's a cop-out a bit. I think you need to write down your goals and objectives, I suppose will be
one of the things I said at the start of the talk in the Law Society was, the position is so demanding that, in terms of your own personal life, before you get into business, you should look at, any things, any financial concerns, health, family, or whatever, and try and nail those problems as much as you can before you embark on a new business, because it's going to be incredibly demanding, but particularly I would say for the first 12 to 18 months. And you don't want those other things that you haven't looked after niggling at you and taken from your work. There are other people depending on you, and if you come into the office, people know if you're distressed, or people know if you're annoyed at something. So it's important to have as much good groundwork done before you embark on purchasing a firm, I'd say, and try and square away any niggling issues that you've been putting on the long finger for quite some time. They're the things that trip you up in the future,
Very good, Conor. Thanks a lot for joining us today. Unless you have anything further to add, I think we're
on the last occasion, people were usually quite quiet and they don't ask you any questions, which is fine. But if you want to put up a link to my website, I'm happy to have them contact me, and I can take any questions.
Okay, we'll be making a recording on of this. Well, we've made it, and we'll send it out on Friday, and I'll put your contact details in with that link out to everybody who registered for the event. So thanks very much for joining us today. Everyone, we're taking 2 months off, July, August. We're going on summer holidays. Well, I'll be around, obviously, but we'll be back in September with our new schedule. So, Conor, thanks a million for joining us today. You've been good sport.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy the summer.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Conor. Bye.